The West Melbourne City Council workshop to order. It's April 5th, 2022. If you'd stand for the pledge and a moment of silence, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated.
I didn't know Navy guys made the play.
He just repeating us something he's heard.
Go Navy.
Can we have roll call, please?
Mayor Rose,
Present.
Deputy Mayor Young. Here. Councilmember Bentley,
Here.
Councilmember Ditmore. Here. Councilmember Batcheldor,
Here.
Councilmember Frampus. Here. Councilmember McDowell.
Great. It's good to have everyone here in person. Tonight's we have our first of many series of budget workshop to discuss what our priorities are in the city. Again, as everyone knows, the budget is a bunch of money to put in there to see how we really want to spend it. A city our size, we can do anything we want. We just can't do everything we want. So we're going to start the process of deciding what's important for the next year and the years ahead. So I will turn this over to Mr. Morgan, that will lead this.
Thank you, Mayor. Well said. We want to spend this hour to try to get up on the board.
You can pull that mic up a little bit more.
Try to get up on the board before the hour's out. Ideas that city council members may have, individual council members may have, that are priorities for you and what you think should be the strategic budget priorities so that we can build the budget around that. So I did put in a couple of attachments in your staff report that are sort of consent calendar type items. So the first one is the sort of the budget calendar. And so, you know, it's kind of our traditional budget calendar that ends with 2 public hearings in September. But as the mayor indicated, we have 5 workshops planned. This is the first of 5 before we get into, you know, actual public hearings, presentation of the proposed budget. So this one and the next one are particularly important because it helps the staff build a budget around the priorities that you as our elected officials decide are priorities for our community. So if there are any questions about the calendar, now would be a good time, or we'll move to the next one, which is a narrative of how we're doing on last year's priorities that you established at this time of the year. We built our budget around those priorities, and now we're implementing those priorities. And so the italics are in that document are sort of describing where we are in implementing those council budget goals that you adopted last year. So we're halfway through our budget year. Our year starts October 1, runs through September 30, so March 31st was our halfway point. So we are making good progress on those things. But if there are items on the current priority list that you want to know more about, how we're progressing, what the status is, again, kind of a consent calendar. If that written report is sufficient, that's fine. We can move right on to getting stuff up on the list. But if there were things that you wanted to talk about, this would be a good time to ask about progress on any of those items that you may be curious about that the narrative doesn't describe it sufficiently.
I think I'm going to go through these numbers. And, number 1 is new water plant. See if anybody has any additional questions on that one. I guess my question, if we had all the money and resources today, do we have all the permitting and everything necessary to move forward, or is there still something that could hold this project from moving forward?
There isn't. We have our consumptive use permit. As you know, we received that from the St. John's Water Management District in December. We've given Melbourne our official notice that we're leaving in 2026. And so there aren't any obstacles here that engineering and construction can't solve. Now, obviously, for individual component parts, we'll still need DEP permitting, for example, for each one of our line extensions. Each one of those has an individual permit. They're very routine. Typically, once we submit, it's a matter of a couple, 3 days. So yes, there is some more permitting, but the main authority for us to utilize the state's resource of groundwater, we have an allocation of 3.76 million gallons a day through 2041. So it's we really don't have, it's a great question, but we really don't have any hurdles that, good engineering and letting construction bids, building the component parts, we're on the way. And as you know, we've bought the water plant site. Thank you very much for the council for making that purchase, and then also for doing the grading while we had excess earth right next door. That worked out great, so the site's now graded. So we're making some really good progress, and I give a lot of credit to our new Assistant City Manager, Tim Rohde. He's really taken on the water plant as one of his own, and so we are making great progress.
Just my follow-up question to that is, I know costs are really out of control right now, and interest rates have risen, so any big picture on that?
There's not a lot we can do about increasing costs. We just have to pay what those construction costs are for pipe and so forth. And you're exactly right. I think everybody's getting real sticker shock with some of the costs. On the good side, when we first in 2017 decided this was financially feasible, we weren't anticipating having ARPA funds available to help in that regard. And so obviously the council has allocated some ARPA funds towards water projects that would otherwise come out of the ratepayers. And so, we should be able to offset those cost increases with the application of ARPA funds and still end up with a rate structure that isn't any greater than the rate structure is today. So that's been our goal, is we have a good rate structure. We think we can do this, and we still believe that to be true, even recognizing increased costs because we have some unanticipated dollars that we can apply to it.
Councilman Bentley?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Morgan, I was just curious, because I've heard different things, what was the response of Melbourne upon our notification that we're going to build our own?
Yeah, they understood. They knew that we'd been working towards that for a while, and they knew we had applied for our consumptive use permit and followed that fairly closely, and so they were unsurprised, and I think they understood that was part of the agreement we made in 2013, that we have this right to exit, and so I think they understand. And obviously sort of the most important item that we've had with them on the water area since then was very cooperative, was the on Ellis Road providing some temporary fire flow water to USSI. They were very supportive and very cooperative. We couldn't have done our part without them, and so I think our relationship with Melbourne is as strong as it's been, I think.
Thank you.
Mr. Frampus?
Since our relationship is so strong with Melbourne, are they going to waive the exit fee on the water plant?
No, they're expecting $250,000 each of the next 5 years, which is our calculated exit fee.
Our relationship's not that strong. What funds is that money coming out of, and is it included in our budget?
The water fund, and yes, it will be. The first payment is due in October of 23, first of 5 equal $250,000 payments, so that will be included in the proposed water fund budget.
Thank you.
And that's an agreement that we made in 2013 to recognize that there were some capital costs system-wide of the Melbourne system, of which we were a part, and for many years we weren't collecting in West Melbourne 100% of Melbourne's capital fee when development would connect into the system. Well, since 2013, we've been collecting the full Melbourne rate, but before that, we were collecting a part rate. So this was a calculation of a $2 million built-up deficit of when, for years, West Melbourne wasn't connecting the full Melbourne rate. So in 2013, we agreed to this $2 million figure, offset by water purchases in the successive years in part. So it ends up being $250,000 for 5 years.
Mr. McDowell?
Thank you, Mayor. My question is about the executive summary that justified this decision was before me. So it's, when you come into these things and you're trying to understand and not second guess the council, but be able to defend the decision, because not everybody is accepting of our decision out there. And I've had some real pushback as to why, and, as far as cost, quality, in health or whatever issues were behind that. Can we get, and this is probably true with any large project, some kind of talking points that allow us to be able to address some of these issues, or even the fluoride issue? That was one of the early ones that came at me. But I do get pushback on from colleagues, peers, of why are we doing this from that city? So it would be helpful.
It's in West Melbourne's best interest. I obviously, if you were a Melbourne council member instead of a West Melbourne council member, you might be wondering what kind of deal they made, and if 10% of their revenues just went away because you agreed to it, maybe you'd be making those comments too. So they recognized that. That was an important part of the negotiations, was to have this exit period where we could make that choice. In 2017, the council looked at the big picture finances and decided it was worth pursuing with a more detailed engineering study. That went to the council in 2019. Council said, let's move forward because the engineering is very promising. As the mayor indicated, sort of the one thing that we didn't have in our hand at that point was our St. John's consumptive use permit. If you don't have that, you don't have anything, and so we have that now, and so we're kind of on our way. So yes, we can give you some history.
I don't want to get defensive with the individuals, but I want to be able to
Right.
support it in a way that is very thoughtful and accurate.
Yeah. I
That'll
mean,
be helpful.
one of the best things I think for West Melbourne water customers, property owners, water customers, is our entire system then will be largely new. We have some older areas of distribution, but much of West Melbourne is within the last 20, 25 years, so it's a pretty good distribution system. Then with a brand new water plant, we haven't built up a lot of deferred maintenance, whereas Melbourne's surface water Lake Washington plant is older, and older plants need upgrades from time to time. They're doing some well field expansion, which is really great for their groundwater supply. But their distribution system generally is older. So I think if we can maintain the same rates to our customers and have a newer system, then this is a generational benefit in my mind.
Mr. Bentley?
Yeah, Mr. Morgan, is it true also that the water quality should be better because everything's new, but also we're pulling our water down from the aquifer. They're pulling out of a lake that has blooms and everything else going on.
Yeah, right now we have a mixed water supply. Some of it is surface water from Lake Washington. Some of it is well water. So it's a blend. West Melbourne's water will come from 4 wells. We won't have any surface water, and so we don't have that opportunity for upset of the water quality on the raw water supply to the plant. It's very consistent. When the raw water supply from these wells is very consistent. So when we treat it, we don't have the variability that Melbourne surface water plant has. So the risk of having a water quality upset is, I won't say it's zero, but it's very much reduced compared to the variability you can get with surface water just from windstorms, right? Lake Washington's not real deep. It can stir up a lot of material in that water and it becomes suspended, and then they have to treat that. So we have less risk in our water supply than our current water supply.
And your belief is also that will either be cheaper or the same cost?
Yes, that's sort of always been the guiding principle going back to 2017 is we think our rate structure is sufficient to do this. Again, as the mayor pointed out, cost of the infrastructure is going up, but we still believe we can maintain our current rate structure and have a new plan. So I think, you know, financially from a ratepayer standpoint, it's very good.
Thank you.
And Mr. Ditmore.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to remind everyone about that, since Councilmember McDowell brought this up, to remind me of the fluoride issue. That issue has not gone away. That's going to actually end up coming back here soon by the information that I have, and there's going to be a push to do that. So more than likely, before we have our plant built, they will, if it passes, they will be removing the fluoride from the water. So one of the things, the pros to this you could pass along is the fact that we would have that control over what we feel is right for our community, where right now we do not. So going forward, so that will resurface, and we probably will be dealing with that before the plant's built. So.
All right, item number 2, flood risk reduction. I know that we had bid openings on that, I believe, and they came up just over millions of dollars over we estimated.
Very, very high bid. So first level of effort is we've gone back to our principal funder there, the State of Florida Department of Economic Opportunity, and have requested additional funds to fill in the gap. Our own representative from DEO has pushed that up to his supervisor. We have a package in for additional requests. We have not heard back, but before we went to the council with award of bid, we wanted to know if we were going to be able to be successful in getting significantly more dollars through that grant source. So we didn't want to bring you a bid opening without knowing how we might fill that gap. So that's our hope. Can't promise that we're going to get an affirmative answer, but at least at the initial staff level at DEO, it's not unpromising.
Mr. Bentley.
Yeah, Mr. Morgan, I know the legislators signed off on the $460K. Did the governor ever sign that?
That hasn't come there yet. So as you know, the mayor has sent a letter to the governor's office supporting that. It's being supported by Representative Fine and Senator Mayfield, and we've also asked the Westbrook Homeowner Association to also communicate with the governor's office since that neighborhood is the primary beneficiary of that flood risk reduction. And so we're hopeful. I probably have more confidence in that one than because it's a more reasonable number and it's gone through the legislative process. The DEO request for Melbourne Estates, I'm optimistic, but it's a lot more money, and they've got to sort of go back with some of their federal funds that go back a few years and pick up some dollars that were unspent, and so I don't know where the state stands on that. But this, I know it's a good appropriation from the legislature, and so I'm fairly confident that one's going to get.
And do we have a quote in hand that we'll be able to work from, or do we have to go out for bid?
We don't have any engineering, so we have to get engineering first. We do have to get permit from Melbourne Tillman. The outfall would be to Melbourne Tillman. And then we'd have to go out with a construction bid. So no, it's going to take us, I think we told them we would have construction completed in 2024. So it's going to take a couple years.
All right. Next item is the that was sanitary sewer. Anybody else on that?
Again, good progress there, including the Hollywood Boulevard reuse replacement. That's well in design now, and so all the projects that the council had budgeted, they're either done or well on the way. Shoney's lift station, all the materials have arrived. So that's always sort of what's holding up contractors now, and so they'll start with the electrical work here shortly. So we're making good progress there.
Mr. McDowell? Sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Morgan, this is the sewer or the septic conversion as well, correct? Or no?
Yes, we have, as you know, we have one of the council goals was to try to get some grant money for additional septic to sewer in neighborhoods off of Sheridan. And we are making great progress there because right now we have grants from 2 different granting agencies that are covering the currently estimated construction cost. So we want to try to get one more grant because we know that costs are escalating. But we have enough to know we're going to go forward with that project. So later on your regular council agenda, we have the scope of services for that engineering work for that multi-million-dollar grant-funded project.
But we do not address the long-term plan of being able to convert 100%, correct? We still have that percentage out there of whatever, and I know it's very small. We talked about that.
Yeah, so using the Florida Department of Health Brevard permitting for septic, we think we had, before we started this process, about 300 homes that had with individual septic tanks. We converted 59 on Sylvan Drive. That's been done and completed, that grant-funded project. This next project is 100 and I want to say 14 or 16. So we'd be about halfway there with this project. And that's a pretty small number compared to the other cities in the county. So we're doing our share pretty well.
Mr. Bentley?
Yeah, also, I just wanted to say thank you. As far as I know from comments I think that you've made that we were the only city that didn't have sewage leakage during storms because of the infrastructure preventative maintenance that you've done. So I want to make sure that we still prioritize maintenance on everything, but including stuff related to sanitary sewer lines and our plan going forward.
That's been a council priority for the last more than decade, and I think was such a good strategy, and it proved itself during Hurricane Irma when we were the only ones that didn't have a sewer spill, and that investment over many years. You can't do that in any one budget year.
Just as a side footnote, we all know we got the report card about the lagoon, and we've been putting all this tax money into it, but yet the grade for this area is F and F minus. Things might change in the future. Going backwards, the priorities might be different if the voters even pass a future half cent. So we got to be aware of all that moving forward. So it's expensive. All right, next item, item 4 is city roads.
So much is either done. Well, the maintenance work is done. The big question is, where is Heritage Oaks and Doherty? We have resubmitted our application to St. John's for our permit. We did construct off-site the required retention for both water quality and water quantity against the future impervious, and so we actually constructed that piece as part of our stormwater pond at the plant that we had the ribbon cutting on. So we have already mitigated for that project in terms of water quality and water quantity. Now we're just asking St. John's to validate the engineering calculations for that. So we're not anticipating any difficulty, but we definitely didn't want to go out to bid before we had our St. John's permit. So we're expecting that within just a few weeks here, and we'll be able to go out to bid on that project. So I know that's been a project long in coming, and we got hung up a long time on the St. John's permit, but we figured out how to make that happen, and it's been constructed. The water quality, water quantity has been constructed, so there's no doubt about it.
I have 2 things on Fell Road extension, eastbound. I know we did the aerial of looking at that. I'm not sure what we learned from that yet, but are we putting money into, in case there's enough room to make that an east-west?
Yes, as you know, that's actually in our budget, funded from our interlocal agreement with Brevard County from transportation impact fees the developers have paid. So that's a project that has an allocation. We did purchase the property at Dairy using those funds, And now we're doing the preliminary engineering, and we'll bring that to the council. They're well on the way there, so we're not too many weeks away from that preliminary concept design and bringing that back to the council.
And also, you're looking at a traffic signalization for Henry and Daughtery when that road's completed. I know you have to see if it's warranted. Are you putting money into the budget in case that is warranted?
No, because we won't be completed by next budget year and have enough time for it to be open to take the traffic count. So that's probably a following budget year item.
And that money, is enough money in the budget to do it all in one year, or you need to save over multiple years for that?
Well, I don't think it's the money to do the study, is that the study can't be done until the roadway is open and you could actually do the traffic analysis with it functioning. And so we could certainly put money in the budget. We would be unlikely to be able to spend it because the roadway won't be open and operating a sufficient amount of time to do that.
I guess we've put money in the budget for Henry and for Heritage Oaks Extension for the last 4 years, so yeah.
And haven't spent it.
Haven't spent a penny. Can you also get us the amount of accidents on Henry, the intersections, or any accidents, what we're seeing so far, just kind of as the baseline?
Good question. We can certainly get that for you.
All right, item number 5 is planning.
So the council, we appreciate the council approving the consultant to help us with that. Christy Fisher has been working with that. We've had good negotiations with them on the scope of services, so we're really very close to getting underway on that. So thank you for the council for supporting that.
And that comp plan will take about a year to get back? Or?
Yeah, there's an awful lot of citizen input that is needed and desired for that, and so we really like the consultant the council selected because they really value citizen input, and as you do, I know. So kind of looking forward to that process.
All right, Parks and Recreation.
Yeah, several specific projects came out over the course of the 5 budget workshops last year, and making progress on those. Probably the biggest question that staff gets from council members and from the community is where's the splash pad, the new pad, and the shade covering, and that I'm going to say the materials are out there. It's we have an installer. The council approved that agreement, and so. I'm not sure how many weeks it's going to take to do that, but we're on the way to implementing that significant project that was a council priority.
Mr. Frampus?
I know we spend a lot of our maintenance on the community park out here, like you mentioned, the splash park, and it looks pretty good over there. I would like to have a greater push for preventative maintenance at some of the other parks. I know through personally walking through them, there's a lot of surface rust on some of the equipment. Some of the equipment is rusted through. I would really hate to see one of our residents get hurt at one of these parks because we're focused elsewhere. So field maintenance, over there, with our only baseball field, that looks pretty rough over there, and stumps. There's lots of stumps that need to be. I guess we cut down the dead trees, but we left the stumps. So I'd like to see them ground down so they're not a trip hazard. I just think we do a lot for our residents underground, so they don't have to worry about our systems there. I'd like to focus a little bit on the stuff that we can see.
Excellent.
Mr. McDowell?
Thank you, Mayor. Questions that I have on this one. The hammock is not updated on here, the park.
I'm sorry, what is it?
The hammock, is it the name of the park there?
Yeah,
it's not been
last year at
addressed.
one of the workshops there was some council discussion about can the city do some things to reduce its costs at Hammock Lakes Park, because it's a park with difficult public access other than people that live in the neighborhood have good access, but others don't. And so there was some discussion about, are there some ideas that could be had for reducing that maintenance costs, and we really haven't done much research
That's my
on
point.
that.
It's not addressed in here, so.
Yeah, no, that's
mi-
definitely not one that we have followed up on with any sort of follow-up.
Also, I had numbered them because it's a little hard to follow, but 6.9 I have as a short-term, long-term planning was not done, as well as the, at least to my knowledge, we could address that one first. I think it's in here that we were going to do some form of long-term, short-term, and I'm just responding to what it said we were going to do.
So one of the discussions at last year's workshops was about the possibility of acquiring some additional property west of West Melbourne Community Park to further expand the park, and there was some discussion amongst the council as to whether or not that was a priority, or doing some other capital projects in the parks would be a better priority use of our park funds that we've acquired from developers over the years. And we have not done the planning study for the 3 acres that we already own. We could certainly do that, get a landscape architect and kind of do like we did for the 18 acres park itself, and figure out how to use that 3 acres. But I guess the question is the council still interested in trying to acquire some additional property off of Flanagan? Because if we're going to do a master planning type look at that 3 acres, what if we were able to add some acreage to this immediately south of our 3 acres we already own that could be planned? And so I guess I'd look for some strategic direction from the council in terms of the interest in possibly trying to acquire some property, or saying West Melbourne Community Parks at 21 acres is it. Let's plan the 3 acres and call it good.
Yeah, I think that's a good plan. Let's enhance what we have. We know what we have. We have that 3 acre, that building that's been sitting for an empty couple years now. I think they're still using it for, they take their breaks in there still for extra room, because the other one's a little too small. So I think we need to utilize that room, that whole acreage, 3 acres, and something with that building. But I like to see the money spent to enhance what we have. The Field of Dreams is getting pretty stale. It needs to be revamped a little bit. We've talked about stands for the skaters. Also, one of the goals, I'm sorry, I didn't.
No, that's all right, Mayor. I was just going to say that's part of the issue is we just haven't addressed it. We haven't put closure to it. Or
It hadn't been a
decided to move
priority,
forward.
yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not asking for any decisions other than it's just not on here. That's all. It's not being addressed.
No, I think it's a good point, because I think we sort of left that, at least as staff, sort of not real clear. I think the mayor has been very clear about exactly what he said here, very, very clear. But I guess we'd be looking for other council members, if we do not want to try to acquire additional acres, that's okay. That's a perfectly fine policy decision. And then we sort of know the path, right? Then it is exactly what the mayor said was, all right, what are we going to do with that 3 acres? How do we integrate that into the park? But then we don't have to try to plan on some additional acreage off of Flanagan as being ultimately part of the park. So,
And Hammock is the same issue. We haven't put that to.
yeah, Hammock was
We haven't closed it.
again kind of the then council having some discussion about that, and I guess I would say I'm a little unclear as to exactly what the council direction might
That's why
be
it needs
for.
to be
Well, as far as Hammett goes, I don't think the community was wanting to take that over, correct, John? I mean, isn't that what,
They don't want the expense.
We
right?
should put that to bed.
Yeah, we put it up twice to the community for that mixed reaction, but most of it was negative, and we just never had. Like you're not getting the clear direction. I've got less than the same what they wanted.
So I guess maybe, more preventative maintenance, existing parks, fields, stump grinding, et cetera. That could be one of the parks where if we've got some barbecues that aren't in good shape or
If we
basketball
keep it-
hoops or whatever, we could do some work to make it a little more usable. Is that?
Well, if you're going to keep it, if it's a city park, we need to maintain it to a certain level. I mean, that's
That sounds like the direction.
with any park,
is
all
not
parks should
necessarily
be there.
trying to reduce costs, but make it a park that is better maintained.
Let it go back to nature. A passive park. Since you can't get there by car, you can't get there by lawnmower.
Well, you can get there by lawnmower, but
Well, they have to ride on the sidewalks with two wheels balancing, but let Mr. McDowell finish, then I'll go.
Right, and then-
Everybody wants to talk about this item.
And then one final item, kind of following up on Mr. Frampus, I had just through, and this should be probably brought up at the Parks and Rec, but the question of the, what do you call these? The fixtures of porcelain seems to be the typical, but I understand porcelain is also one of our high damaged products out there. And that,
Westbrook Park has had a lot of damage to the sinks and toilets. We had in the past looked at stainless steel fixtures, not had success in that regard, but I think that would be the ultimate solution there. Now, we also are putting up some security cameras there that we didn't have before, so at least we could figure out who done it. And at least bring those people to justice and perhaps get some remuneration from them for the damage. But I think the answer is stainless there. Even in a retrofit, even if it's not perfect, it's going to be better than, Insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a
Right.
different result, but they've just been busted up so many times. We need to make that
that's what I
switch.
was kind of, my understanding as well, and is someone doing that value analysis, somebody looking at that return, because should we be looking at all of our fixtures or is it isolated? But we don't have to answer it today, but just.
Right.
I think that's Westbrook Park is where that's happened. We haven't had that happen elsewhere. And of course, in West Melbourne Community Park, it's all stainless. It's new.
I'd like to comment on the maintenance, just like the young lady said, that all our parks need some kind of help. And I know you have maintenance up there, but is the question, is there not enough funds? Is there not enough help? Should maintenance and lawn mowing be two separate? Parks and Rec be different than mowing grass? Should that be the same department? So that's something you're going to have to figure out, but I mean, we have plenty of money, and why aren't these things being done, I guess, is the question. We're not even talking about new things, but keeping up the standards that we want in West Melbourne.
Yeah, some of these things we can actually have contractors do. For example, stump grinding. When we've done some stump grinding, you can see some out here, and you can see some in some of the other parks. That's a budget item. We can put a line item and count and go, here's what it is, and a tree contractor can do that. We don't have the manpower equipment for that. So there are certain maintenance items that you can buy from a maintenance contractor and solve the problem. So I think if we do budget for things like that, we can take care of that problem.
I don't look at that as a Parks and Recreation issue per se, but
Well, I think
yeah.
a lot of those stumps are in our parks.
That's
Yeah.
where I saw most of this.
Right, right. But we took those trees out because it was too crowded, and then I guess that's how we felt we left them. But that's not, I'm really talking about the sports, the activity part of it, as opposed to how often the grass is mowed and those kind of things. Kind of two separate sides, I believe.
Well, in terms of the fields, our fields are at Clements Wood Park. We don't have any other ball fields. That's our ball field. That's West Melbourne's.
Yeah.
Correct.
Is the one ball field. So that infield maintenance, you know, that's us, and we have the equipment that can do that. We have the rakes and that kind of stuff. And
My problem is it's not getting done.
correct. So
Yeah, that's
that. I wouldn't
It's not a
describe
budget
that as
item.
a
Okay. The item,
budgetary. That's a allocation of resources towards that as a maintenance priority.
the item I'd like to see added is probably the number one sport right now, game that's been out there is pickleball. And I'd like to see our city build 4 pickleball courts so we can have tournaments and different activities.
Yeah, they're lined over there, right?
They're lined, but that is not even close to being what you need. You can put 2 pickleball courts on 1 tennis court, so it doesn't take as much room. You don't have to chase that wiffle ball all the way to the end. I think we can upgrade something with a nice pickleball complex with the nets close and fences and
Where would it be good to explore that possibility? In what park?
well, if it doesn't fit at the Field of Dreams Park, it could fit right out here by the tennis courts as a possibility.
Field of Dreams Park. You mean the 3 acres?
Well, it could be there too, but it could be, I don't know if it would fit beside the, you kind of want lights, but besides the playground, if that's a big enough area or not. I mean, pickleball court's only 40 feet deep, where tennis courts,
Where the original plan was for some mini golf?
right.
Ooh, that seems awfully tight for.
It might be, but I'm just putting that out there that I
Yeah,
think
that's
it's,
what we're looking for, just ideas at this point.
I think almost every city has real pickleball courts, not just lines on an existing court. But again, the difference is when you put lines on a tennis court, you still have 30 feet behind the court. It doesn't really work as well for that game. So I like to explore that.
So we have a fairly little used basketball court off of Florida Avenue. It's already fenced. That probably could be converted to pickleball fairly easily. Is that the kind of thing that you?
Well, you couldn't make 4 courts out of 1 basketball, and it has to face a certain direction. You can't have tennis or pickleball facing into the sun, so you have to face it
Yeah,
north-south.
that one's north-south.
Yes.
Yeah, the basketball court's north-south.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't think there's parking there, nor restrooms or anything else there, so,
No, there aren't.
yeah, so. Ms. Young?
Yes, I have just a couple things here. Well, I'm just thinking of it here. There's a you said off of Florida Avenue. You mean the Florida Avenue that goes down off of
No, you
Henry?
mean-
There's a Florida
Yes.
Avenue there, then the back of Tallwood Park?
Yes.
Okay, all right, because I don't think that basketball court ever, I see people playing on it, but I don't think it gets any attention
It's
at all.
a good court.
It's the only courts we have in the city, too.
And we finished the court itself is in decent shape.
No
It
parking.
just doesn't get a lot. There is no parking, there is no restroom, and we would never get either of those. So another park that we have lots of room in, again, has
Tallwood.
limited parking and no restroom, is Tallwood.
Clements
might-
Wood probably has enough room.
Again, limited parking, but it does have a restroom. So it's got that.
Doesn't have any parking because we haven't designated any parking, which is another part of the problem with our parks, is we're not giving residents a place to park. So I think that's a big issue with some of our parks.
All right, so then going on past that, your question regarding acquiring land, I would be open to acquiring land as long as it's the right land. I thought we lost our opportunity buying the closest land to the Field of Dreams Park. I thought we lost that, and it was already sold, and so now that's no longer on the table.
Well, it's still vacant.
Okay.
Just because it has a new owner doesn't mean it's still a vacant, there's no structure built on it.
Okay, so
In other words, you're saying everything's for sale at the right price. So.
I would be open to acquiring more land as long as it was the right land that made sense, like that particular piece made sense. The going again on what Mr. Frampus said, the Field of Dreams, since I was going over there for COVID testing as often as I was, I certainly noticed that when you drive in and you go to park there, the first thing you notice is all the brown on the roof of that metal, that nice silver metal roof. I don't know if it's rust or if it's dirt or
No,
if it's
and
Mildew.
we rented a lift for a week, and I believe that's probably been taken down now. So we rented a lift for multiple purposes, and one was to power wash that.
Okay, so it was a washable thing. It wasn't
Yes.
rusting through. Okay, all right. So, and I know that,
Now, whether that actually got done, I mean, it was any day, and the lift is going to be used in different places, but yes, we're aware of that, and the plan was to power wash, but from a safety of a lift.
okay. And then the Clements Woods playset, one of the things that was discussed at the Parks and Rec meeting was either trying to save the playset that's there or replace it, either replace it or save it.
So the plan for the Parks and Rec director is to do some of each. Some of it is not salvageable, not safe, needs to come down, needs to be thrown away. Some of it can, and so we have in the current budget some replacement new play equipment, and to be able to call it renovate, but basically just clean up some of the stuff that is serviceable and not potentially becoming more of a risk. So it's the current plan is a mixed plan for that. Now, next year, we're also thinking that that park could use, as you know, we had a park bench sort of sitting up on the covered porch of the restroom, which was kind of a terrible place for a park bench and to want to have a snack. And so it was staff's desire to see if we can't budget for a one of those enclosures, those picnic enclosures like we have out at West Melbourne Community Park for Clements Wood. So I did ask our department heads if they had some ideas that we could sort of suggest to the council at this workshop, and that was one that Rich suggested, which I thought was a good one, so that people that, you know, would go to Clements Wood would have a nice picnic shelter, you know, similar to what we have, the nice ones at West Melbourne Community Park. So I offer that as a possible suggestion for budget consideration.
Okay, all right. And then my last comment is something we've been talking about for years is the I-95 and 192 entrance and exit. We've got the Space Coast Town Center going out there. We really need to step up our game on that.
And doesn't it look good now that the state finally got it all weed-eated up? And
It looks
so,
better.
Yeah, and so we want to get our contractor out there that does the mulching and the tree limbing while the grasses are down. And so Rich is working to use some of the existing budget to go do a second treatment this year to trim some of the trees and get the mulch down around the bases. That way the grasses don't grow up around the trees. But the state lost their contractor. I don't know who their contractor is, but they did a good job just pretty recently. It looks way better than it has in a long time.
Okay, so I know that we had to have a special contractor that had to be specially licensed to work next to 95.
Yes.
And then our crew was doing the lower part.
Yes.
We could do that. So you just said the state lost their contractor, so we don't have a contractor anymore for?
They do now.
No, the state, they had a master contract for way more than this with a contractor, and that contractor no longer has that contract with the state. So they have a new one because the new one came in and did that. Now, I don't know who they are, but the contact was always with DOT, their COCO field office, and their previous contractor. I don't know who their new contractor is.
Okay.
But the state doesn't do it with state employees. They contract for that work to clean up the grasses.
Okay, so
slopes.
I'm just wanted to say that's something that we need to stay on because it
Yes.
gets so bad so quickly. And then I thought that was my last thing, but I thought of one more. Street sweeping. The street sweeping company that we have does not always do a very good job. Have we thought about doing it in-house?
No. For 12 times a year sweeping, that's not a good value proposition to do that in-house. The equipment is very expensive. It breaks down. Without a really good equipment operator, you can damage vehicles. You know, I've heard, been a long time since I heard on dissatisfaction with the company, but all the street sweepers pretty much function the same way. There were some streets that staff didn't think were sweeping because they didn't have vertical curbs or even Miami curves, just swales, and you're not really doing a lot in a street. I mean, you're picking up some, but it's much better if you have a curb to work up against, and the way the brushes rotate it and pulls it up, it's much better. But that's the first I'd heard of quality concern. Now that contract is coming up for renewal pretty soon, so we can go out and get bids on that.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mr. Frampus, you're next.
Thank you, Mayor. Back to the community park and the open space over there. Have we considered at all with that house to make some kind of senior center out of it? Has that ever been talked about?
It hasn't, but it's a good idea.
Might want to put that on the list to discuss. And also, since that is one of our most active parks, the land next to the house, maybe considering a relatively cheap thing is putting a fence up for a dog park there instead of hiding one here behind this building that nobody gets to see or use.
I'm sorry, I was writing. I need to understand the geography of where you're talking about.
Next to the building that we talked about in the community park.
Oh.
The open space next to it, maybe fencing that in and allowing it used as some sort of dog park or something, where we were going to put the recycled material for everybody to smell.
Okay, so let me take us back to the discussion we had about trying to master plan that 3 acres. That's sort of one opportunity that probably wouldn't be a bad opportunity for that site, but obviously if you consume it, you know, with other uses, how much does the council want to have a plan for the 3 acres, even if we can't, you know, develop all of it in one budget year, as opposed to saying, hey, I think I know what we want there, and we can put in a dog park or a senior thing. I mean, those are perfectly great uses. And a dog park was thought about for West Melbourne Community Park, but discarded in favor of the other uses that we have out there. So I guess
Well, there's
I'm
open
really looking
space
for some
right now
direction from the
by the house,
council
right?
on planning that site. Perfectly good idea.
Well, I'm perfectly fine with not spending more money on land because we're not utilizing all the space we have with the parks that we have now. There's quite a bit of open space in some of the parks that we could better utilize. So I'm open for discussing different uses for sure. Thank you.
Mr. Ditmore?
Thank you, Mayor. I just briefly want to touch on the Hammock Lakes. Someone mentioned there's only one basketball court we have in the city of West Melbourne, but the Hammock Lakes does have a basketball court back there, and it does get used just about every night. During the day, it doesn't seem to get much use, but I've been tracking a little bit what's going on back there. After school, the kids are back there quite a bit, and on the weekends, people are back there quite a bit. I did get some feedback from some residents about closing that, and they were pretty upset about if we decided to close it, so I just sort of backed away from that idea with the, and not just the people living in Hammock Lakes, but other people that are coming in, or Stratford Point community. And that's, I think the park was actually, one of the reasons it was put there was for Hammock Lakes, and I think for the Stratford Point people there, you know, for a park to actually, for them to utilize. But Just want to touch on that. And the other thing I want to talk about a little bit is that property there off of, is it Flanagan or Fell, the one where there's 3 lots or whatever, and they were waiting to see if it would ever sell Flanagan. Most aware of that section of property there that runs south off of Flanagan that's up against Minton. There's several acres there. There's a couple of companies that are trying to determine what they're going to develop there, and one of the projects is was shared with me as a nice project to be a nice shopping area, commercial area, and more of a kind of hometown feel type shopping without trying to give too much of it away. But parking was going to be an issue for this location, I think. And if that does take off, I think some parking space, or I hate to say parking tech, but some parking is going to be necessary. And also parking that would be used, because parking for the West Melbourne Community Park sometimes gets a little tight in there when we try to have certain events. So having additional parking is something I think might want to consider, if something like that would become available, usage for that, to where we could get a bunch of vehicles in there. Because when we do have an event there, that parking lot fills up pretty quickly, and the only other thing to do and we talked about, is maybe using the church parking lot across the street, and then you're coordinating bringing the pedestrians across Minton. But I just kind of floating this idea for right now as to thinking about maybe if we were to do something. And it's all going to be dependent on what they do there, because if they put that section in there, if something gets developed there, it's going to be really nice. If we utilize the park for events in coordination with that, people coming to go to the shopping and people want to come to the park, they'll have places to actually park their vehicles. So that's something I think we need to kind of plan for the future. That's all.
Thank you. Mr. Bentley, you're next.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, Mr. Morgan, I had a couple of things. One is Steve's my new hero with the dog park. I tried to get that when we originally built it and lost out, and that's fine, but I feel new light on that. So maybe we could consider, as part of that 3 acres, I don't know which makes sense. We'd have to look at the size, but either you could take this current dog park and make pickleball courts out of it. I don't know if that makes sense. Someone would have to look at the sizing and what would be required, and then put the dog park over there. But in general, on all of our parks, I want them to be what I consider to be next level parks, better than just maintenance that we're doing on these, but make them focused on maybe a theme. I don't know. I mean, I think Field of Dreams is a special place, and I think people think, wow, that's something neat that your city has. I'm not suggesting we don't have the money to spend on each one of our parks to do that, but I think we could do a whole lot better than what we're doing, which is just basic maintenance. So we could make people want to go to these parks because they offer something to the folks other than a field that's mowed, maybe. I don't know. So I'd like to see us really look at that and take our parks to the next level, or if we don't need it, get rid of it. I mean, something like that. But again, pickleball is something that the mayor mentioned. In my community, we had 2 tennis courts, and they've been there for 30 plus years. I can tell you, we spend $10,000 every 5 years to get them resurfaced, and no one used them. But you got to take care of it. It's in the middle of our community. We switched recently one of those courts to 2 pickleball courts. It's packed out. We had over 30 people there the night that the mayor came out and went and played with us out there. There's a lot of pent-up demand for pickleball right now. We've got people playing out there, 4 women playing out there every day at lunchtime, plus others. It's just, wow. I mean, you would never think you'd go from something that was totally unused, that you're spending money on, to something that really has a lot of impact and a lot of folks coming to it. So I really would like the city to do some kind of a first-class pickleball, whether it's over here or over there, wherever you guys think it fits best. But the second item, again, as Steve said, I want a dog park that's a next level, park, not just something that would, like what we have out here. I want something that people want to bring people from all over the city want to bring their animals and go to. But in summary, again, I want all of our parks to be, to the extent possible, what I consider to be next level, not just some kind of, we tick the box that we have a park there. And I think Field of Dreams is a good example. And again, obviously, we don't have that kind of money to spend, but I think we could do a lot better than what we are doing.
So let me offer a suggestion, since there's been so many comments about our existing parks. One of the things that we could do to sort of get this comprehensively, whether it's done in one budget year or 2 or 3, is to do a existing park upgrade master plan for all of our existing parks and lay out those ultimate future improvements. And if it took us, you know, a few budget years to do that, but, you know, one year it's Tallwood, the next year it's Clements Wood. I mean, you could sort of march through our existing parks and do some upgrades if we had a plan that the Parks and Rec Advisory Board and the City Council and the community thought, yeah, that's the plan, that's what we want our parks to be. So I think you've all sort of articulated the desire for the parks to be improved, but I'm suggesting maybe at the front end, with a little bit of money, we could probably prepare something that you could all, kind of like the water plant, right? At the critical point, you vote and we're going. At the critical point, you vote, and these are the list of improvements for the next 5 years in our parks. And that way, even if it doesn't happen in year 1, then you know it's planned, and it makes our multi-year budgeting better. So if I'm reading the council right, there's a little bit of interest in maybe looking at some additional parkland, but more interest in focused on our existing parks that could use some upgrading. Is that a fair read?
A lot of upgrading, upscale.
Okay.
Upscale parks.
Significantly.
So,
And the read also should be, if you don't understand something, let us know before the year's out, because we're here, you know, a couple times a week, a month anyway, to answer any questions about upgrading the parks or what we want or what we don't want.
Could we do one this year as well, as do a master plan? Could we pick something that we could do this year?
what park would you like?
I don't know, a dog park.
I don't have a big as problem as setting the plan, because I think it's a great idea. I think what's happening is we're failing on the preventative maintenance, and what we have is getting rusty, and we're not taking care of what we already have. If we don't do that, then we're just going to be fixing that in 5 years with our plan of replacing things. I don't think we should replace them as much as we should get in there and just do some preventative maintenance, and it's going to last a lot longer. These outbuildings, Hammock Lakes, for instance, has 3 nice outbuildings. 2 of them are pretty well rusted out up top with surface rust that could easily be cleaned up and repainted and not have to spend another 20 grand on putting another building up. So, I mean, there's preventative maintenance that we can do, which we're failing on, and we need to get a grip on that prior to planning out new stuff. That's my
I believe we can maintain what we have, fix up what we have, and also do new things, because none of our workers are going to be building the tennis courts or pickleball courts, so we can do them both at the same time. It's just managing it. I understand that, but Mr. Morgan needs to make sure that we can get this done. I mean, again, I don't know if it's budgetary or just, you said you didn't understand what council wanted in us last year. So I think the direction is we want to see the parks maintained regardless of what we go forward with, so.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. McDowell?
Thank you, Mayor. Just want to make sure we include in our thinking about the request for either jogging trails or walking trails or bike trails, some kind of trail system, which has not been really thought about in a comprehensive way. So that was part of it. And I'd like to push back on the purchasing of land, because to me, I hear we have limited land, and when it's available, I hear more people saying, you know, boy, I wish we would have bought that, than people saying, wow, we have it. You know, there's this sense of regret for not taking and seizing the moment. And I'm not suggesting we spend foolishly here, but if it's available, take it seriously and look at it, especially if we have, you know, beyond just the next 2 years. Thank you.
I just want to comment also on the Powell House, Park House there. That's 3 acres. We're also looking for a place for our fire department. I don't know if we're going to rule that out because that could be a perfect place for a potential firehouse. It has traffic lights there and all those kind of things. I don't know if it is or it isn't, but before we put the cart before the horse, that's just one observation. The other thing we've talked about is a senior center. When we build the building department, I don't know how big of a footprint we're going to have. It's going to be 6,000 square feet or whatever. Again, the second floor could be for a good senior center on the second floor of that with an elevator.
So we had a different idea for a senior center from an existing resource, which is the Park House, which has been renovated and pretty high quality.
But
For senior programming, it's there, it's done. It doesn't have to wait for a building department building. Is that?
it's a different, we have this building that we're in right now that's underutilized, has all these little compartmental rooms for small groups. I'm looking at a place, even having a party here, it's just a long rectangle that's crooked at best. If we had a 4,000 square foot thing, we can have functions in there, and that's completely different layout than the Powell House that has 3 or 4 different rooms, and I think it's a different concept.
So maybe probing a little bit, what I understand in general senior programming, Parks and Rec departments understand that. What's the council's ideas of the types of services that a senior center would provide?
I would say twofold: active activities. The only kind of activities we seem to have, if you have a teacher that wants to teach chess, if they have or whatever game or skill they have, painting, you have a teacher, students pay their money, and then you have a course. Ours is passive that way. We have all these rooms in here. Again, I think we have all that open area that could be maybe converted to a bigger room, have a big 5,000 square foot room upstairs to have big functions where you can have gatherings. We can't even have our little city parties in here with our workers. It just gets crowded. So it's just my thought. It's different than a senior center per se. I don't know that a senior center needs a 5,000 square foot big open area. Yeah.
So that sounded like a community gathering place for larger
Yes.
gatherings, indoor gathering space is how
Yep.
that has been articulated.
Deputy Mayor Young?
If we had council meet over there, then you could turn this particular room, let it go with the Veteran Center, and you could add this particular room along with that. And if we had council, we moved us out and put us in that new building over there. We could use it as the senior center as well, and also for our council meetings, and let this be part of what's here already. I think I said that 3 times.
So again, that I've heard senior center a 3 times.
Well, we can call it a community.
No, I
center,
guess I just was
community
interested
center.
in the type
Activity
of
center.
services, because then that focuses on the types of facility you have. So for example, here we have a reasonably good kitchen for sort of that very purpose, right? We gutted what was there, created a kitchen so that there can be caterers come in, a hot box, and all that kind of stuff. So obviously, it depends on the type of use that you want, but typically for a gathering, a lot of times that involves food service, so that sort of goes into the space planning
Yeah.
that you would do.
My thoughts for a senior center, we're a meeting place during the day for seniors. We have a brand-new recreation parks board that they can come up with ideas on different functions to be held there, or you know, some sort of senior group that wants to come in and plan things out. I think it would be a great idea for them to kick that around and bring something back to us. That's kind of what we wanted that board for, right? I mean,
In the senior center that I've been exposed to is more of a social gathering. It's not necessarily, you know, doing the exercise, and they can, but
You're
the
not that
social gathering, and they wouldn't be on a second floor. Typically, it'd be as convenient as possible.
Well, we have elevator, we'd put an elevator, it's not required by code, but
and I don't recommend a fire department over where we're going to have kids running around, so I don't know that that's such a good idea to have at the Field of Dreams to, if you were thinking about putting a fire department over there. I think it's
convenient when they get hurt. They're right there, so.
I think the bigger picture, though,
Or
is
run over.
having a senior center and a place to have a larger gathering is really the question. But I'm not a city planner. This is not my forte, so I don't know, you know, we can try to come up with all these different ideas, but when it comes down to it, if we say these are the areas, the gaps that we feel need to be addressed, then it should be the advisory board and others that kind of congregate and figure it out, or at least come back with some ideas for the mayor.
Also, just the last thing we need to move on is we have the Triangle Park here, Jan Leeson Park. We have all the wood area there that's definitely not used. That's a great place for something for the city. Whether we move Jan Leeson Park to another place that's utilized as parking and use this for something else, something to think about. That's just a great visual place right out here in front of the school on Minton.
Yeah, and Mayor, I wanted to make one comment. On the building there, I just think it's important, whether it's a senior center or I don't know exactly yet, but to put the shell in for a second story now while you're building it. I mean, I think the council's mentioned several times that while you're building that facility, bottom floor, whatever, for the building, why wouldn't we make a second floor? And we can determine, like this building, we originally were going to move over there, the council was, and we ended up, you guys consumed the whole building, which is fine, and we kept the council here. But I would like us to have that shell on of a second story rather than have to try to go back and add something later. I think it'd be a whole lot cheaper. And whether that was a senior center or anything else up there, I don't know. We can figure that out.
We'll call it a community center. All right, let's move on because we're way behind. Number 7 on the budget is police. Obviously, fund that. Any other comments? Obviously. Mr. Ditmore? Ditmore's here, yeah.
Something that you guys weren't thinking about that Mr. Richardson brought up to us when we were talking about using a building department and using it for other things that we wanted to use it for in the past. And I think he brought up to us or told us that the building department would have to be used for building department purposes only. Yeah, and you can't.
We'd pay for it on different funds for the second floor.
Right, that would have to be.
Do it all at one time.
Right. I just want to make sure that.
You
Right.
can make the building department build.
Right.
All right, number 8, fire department feasibility study. We've done that, and we're getting that back in the early summer.
Yes, we think August, September is your likely delivery date. We'd had a very good meeting with county fire management, very cooperative. Had a follow-up call today with our consultant, and we chose well, and I'm very pleased that the county is really making a big effort to get us the detailed data that we need to conduct the analysis. So I give a lot of credit to the county fire management, their new chief and deputy chief, and they're providing what we need to do the analysis.
Our next, Mr. Ditmore, do you have a question?
Thank you, Mayor. I've got a couple questions here about that. Jeez, oh, Pete.
Need to put that in the budget too, if we could.
Yeah.
New speaker for him.
What, if any, projections should we make for the next fiscal year if the fire department, we get the study back and it says, okay, we need to do X, Y, and Z. We need to be looking at acquiring this particular location or this location. And do you have any preliminary locations from the study? Have they made any suggestions yet?
No, but they will.
Okay.
Right.
So what do we do?
What we told them was, don't just look at city-owned sites. Look at every greenfield site we have and suggest it should be where it should be, because it's about service to the community, not about what we already might own. And so we're hoping we get the professional view of where a fire station, if we had a fire service, should be located.
So should we decide to move in that direction based on the study and the recommendations for locations, I just think it would be prudent if we're looking to purchase property that we make that the priority for because we'll know that this year, obviously in the next few months we'll know that we have that. So is that something we're going to need to circle back and say, to adjust the budget to say we're going to need to do this?
I guess I would treat that sort of like when we have a collective bargaining agreement coming up and expires in the middle of the fiscal year. We don't try to guess what that is in our budget. We simply amend the budget. So if we get the fire study and it says we should buy this particular parcel, then we amend the budget and seek to acquire that parcel. If it happens to be already city-owned, then we don't have to do that. But I hear what you're saying, and that could well be one of the early steps. Now, part of what we're getting from this study is sort of a rough implementation guide that lays out a sequencing. And so that...
Is acquiring the location the priority in the sequencing as far as, I mean, to me, I think it would be a location, but because we're short on land as it is, I mean, is that a priority for the council to make that decision, sort of? Like, do we need to make that a priority?
Well,
or how does staff
we're
feel
going to
about
bring the report back to the council, and the council can make, just like sort of the water plant, a whole series of decisions, right? That was not just yes or no, build the water plant. It was, where do we want to get the raw water supply? Where should the plant be located? There was a series of 6 or 8 important decisions, and so I'm envisioning this fire study being that, right? Have an independent fire department or another alternative, and if it's an independent fire department, then here are, 6, important decisions that would send us on our way.
There's a lot of talk about acquiring and maybe looking at other locations. I think this year I think it should be our priority. I don't know what the other council members think, but I think that's a priority for us because it is safety for the community, and it is in acquiring locations, getting them, having them from when we need to build later, 2 years or 3 years out or whatever. At least we'll have those locations done, and we know they're going to be there. I think if we're going to acquire any property, and I hope everyone else would agree that would be a priority, as a safety priority for the community later down the road. Thank you.
Obviously, that's a priority, but we got to see if the numbers make sense. No use buying land if it's a no-go. If it's a go, yes.
As I stated, if we decide to move forward with it, which we will be making those decisions in the next few months, then I would assume we'll be making those decisions in the next few months based on the result of the study. If it's a go or no-go, then we make a priority as far as getting the locations.
Okay. All right, human resources. Any questions on that? Yeah. All right. Finance. City buildings, besides the new building we're talking about.
Yeah, one of the things we'll be bringing to you as well as you've talked a little bit kind of at the end of the workshops, almost when we were hearing about this lighting and the air conditioning in here, and maybe now would be a good time to flesh out more what you're interested in. Is it sort of more daytime LED natural light, the color and that, and I guess we sort of heard that I want to say it almost at the last hearing. It sort of got added in, and so we want to do what the council wants. We just need to have a better sense of what you're thinking about there.
Probably modernize it and get a little more light here.
So improved lighting for the dais is sort of one of the driving things?
The whole thing, I mean, I think we can upgrade whatever those things are above your head.
Please get rid of those.
So
Mr. McDowell?
upgrade it, I guess I'm trying to say, is it visual, or is there a sense that the lighting's too dark, or I guess I'm trying to
Let me,
know what the scope of the project is.
Mr. McDowell?
Thank you, Mayor. I think this is a great place to introduce or reintroduce the idea of having a sustainability advisory board, because we can address a lot of these lighting issues and some things that are strategic that make sense for us in the long term that probably are economically to our benefit as well. But I think there's an overlapping between the IT, the HR, and the IT, HR, and finance, is that there's a whole bunch of those areas work very close together, and sustainability overlaps into all those areas. And I would guess my question would have been, is that are we thinking about the cybersecurity issues? Are we thinking about long-term, not short-term? So we need to start looking at it today so we can start investing in the future. But Sustainability Advisory Board, I think, overlaps, especially in these areas. And I know last time at the workshop, we actually brought it up, and I pushed back and said, no, I think it's too early. Well, now it's not too early. I would really push for being able to, especially if we're going to have a report here, I believe, next meeting on where we stand with all our sustainability issues.
As far as the visual, I mean, I think we can modernize this. There's probably asbestos in this, but I'm not sure. But anyway, all these ceiling tiles and lights above our heads should be revamped. Mr. Frampus?
I didn't realize, Pat, thanks for pointing out that council was supposed to move over into the new building. I think if that is an option for the second floor to be council chambers over there, that would be a great option. As far as this room goes, I think audio visual aids, I mean, you could have some large screen TVs on these, and because always have problems people pointing to the screen over there, and we can't see what they're pointing to, and I think the audio visual could be updated as well, maybe on the two walls over here, so everybody can see it, no matter where you're sitting in the room.
We used to have it. Did you see that hole in the wall? That's used to be.
Talking about on these flat
Yeah, it
walls
used to
on
be
each
up
side.
there. But
So, I don't know, Mayor, maybe your eyes are getting a little bit old, but I can see pretty good over here. The light's not too bad, so.
as far as the, I'll agree with you on that one. Both of them, actually. We were going to move the council chambers upstairs. That was a philosophy, but then the other philosophy was only having a meeting twice a month. Is it worth spending that much money for new construction just to
We
have it
utilize
twice
it
a
for
month?
other meetings, correct?
Well, kind of. We don't allow a lot of things in here anymore. So, Mr. Ditmore?
I'm a little curious about the asbestos comment. But, I mean, to the point, look, we're here 4 or 5 hours a month, and I know the other boards meet here, you know, P&Z and, you know, Parks and Rec, they meet here. But putting a lot of money into this place, we're really not sure where we're going to go with it. I mean, you know, look, I've was a municipal employee for 20 plus years before I even got involved here. This place looks pretty good, to be honest, with what I'm used to seeing. So I don't see us putting a lot of money into a place, because to me it works, and I don't believe in putting money into something that doesn't work. And if you need an extra TV or something, that's fine. But I don't see these are taxpayer dollars, and I don't agree with putting extra money in here just to say because we want to do this or that. The lighting works. We can see it's perfectly. I can see really good here. It's not dark in here. The problem is with the air conditioning, in my opinion, is there's 7 people up here with 7 different temperatures going on, and some people are too cold, some people are too hot, and it just depends on who's sitting up here at the time. As far as wasting putting money into this place, I wouldn't, and I don't say it's a waste. I'll just say we should redirect, put money somewhere else. These are taxpayer dollars. This building works. It absolutely works. And we want to add a TV because we need it so other people can see, that's fine. But I don't agree with putting money into this place.
Mr. Bentley?
Yeah, the only comment, you know, once everything's decided and figured out, if we are sitting here, that's fine. But I would like to see something about the air handling. It's very noisy sitting here. It's really hard to hear other people talking very often, just because we've got a noisemaker sitting right behind us. So if there's something that could be done to this noisemaker to, I think it's plenty cold in here right now. I think people can't argue that the air's working, so that's great. But sitting here, at least, I think for these 3 or 4 people, it's pretty noisy. And oftentimes I'll struggle to hear everything that's going on just because this thing kicks on. It's really nice. You can hear well when it turns off.
Well, somebody put this on the council, and the council voted again as a budget item, as a goal for the city manager to do. So that was back in.
Yeah, and getting this clarification on what's desired is terrific, because that helps us when we engage contractors to give us estimates of the work. We want to make sure we're doing the work that the council wants. So having more flesh on the bones of what is desired is terrific. So thank you.
All right. So what do you have, Mr. Morgan?
If there are other ideas in other areas, obviously we have another one of these workshops where we'll keep putting stuff up on the list, but I think that was very good, and there was a lot of consensus on some of the park type items, and I think that was very helpful.
I have a couple bullets you can put up there. I've had people ask about safety rails on Henry, because we have that ditch right at 2 inches from the roadway. So safety rails on Henry where the ditches are.
And that's part of the proposed Melbourne Estates project.
Okay.
So that's incorporated, provided we're able to find some additional grant money and move forward. But yes, we have design of that because where the existing water main that we replaced is exactly in the wrong place. So part of that project is to put in a new water main, abandon the water main where we have to set the railing.
Another bullet I had is when you retire, and make sure we have a budget for another assistant city manager. Or is that already budgeted?
So maintain
the level that we have now?
So maintain a city manager and 2 assistants is what you're
Correct.
saying. So
you're enjoying that. So.
Maintaining that staffing.
Yeah, with so many projects we have, and we want these to move forward, so they all seem busy now. And let's see.
That doesn't necessarily have to be a assistant city manager, right? It could be a project director or something.
Well, that's what they kind of are now, right? They're in charge of these new projects.
To me, that's a broader picture than that. Theoretically, it should be.
Also, let's see. I don't know where this fits in here, but we have about 20% of our land left in the city. I think we need some real goals on how we want that developed, and not.
Yeah, that's the comp plan that we're working on.
Yeah. But I think we need to have some more things closer to us now to start talking about some of those goals that we can enact, or any code changes that we might need. I mean, we talk about how many apartments we want, or whatever you want to insert, how many gas stations, whatever you want to insert. I don't know that the comp plan will tell us exactly those numbers. Does it right now? Yeah, it's not a blanket, it's a living, working document. But what I'm saying is, how do we want the rest of, what do we want the rest of the city to look like as we progress?
Sort of a general, description of what we want is fine. But remember, I think, Mayor, you were here when we were discussing about service stations, and how many, should there be a limit, on service stations. That gets into that slippery slope of, the private property rights and some of the other things. So, I mean, in general, we can put, some limits, but it's not like we could have a hard, fast limit and say we want only 3,000 more apartment units and that's it.
Only 3,000 more. Well, I'm not even saying.
A number, even 100 or 2. I mean, you can't do that.
Apartment's just an example. What do we want the rest of the city to look like?
Sure, and that's a valid question through the comprehensive plan process. And if you kind of indulge us in the next year, I think we'll we'll kind of get to some of that. But yeah,
Meanwhile, that 20% keeps shrinking, so just
it
an
does,
observation.
but how do you stop people from using their land?
Don't want to do that, but it's all, a lot is code built also. What do we want the codes to look like? So,
Yeah, and the code should all sort of fall from the comprehensive plan. That's why I always say it's like an umbrella. So
all right,
I hope
thank
that
you.
helps.
All right. Anyone else?
Just along those lines, Mayor, I think that we could establish changing zoning and what we want. We can't tell them what to do with our land, but we can surely not change zoning to what it already is, which will allow them to build more apartment buildings, correct? I mean, that's something that we can do as a council. So, I mean, that we might want to get that outlined clearly on the agenda.
Yeah, but it's not only apartments. That's one item, but there's a lot of things. What do we want this city? What do we want? How do you describe West Melbourne? That's a tough one. We don't really have an identity. I don't know if that fits into this either, but do we want to work on that?
Yeah, we had it off-site a year ago, December, and that was one of the tasks, and we ended up with a vision statement, which was, I think, a really good one and an appropriate one, but we never quite arrived at consensus on that.
We do have an awful lot of those projects that we spend good money and they make a nice brochure and a nice thing and it gets on the shelf. It just does. That's what we do. So I'm just saying, as time runs on, I mean, could you name, I know you're kind of saying, what did all those things in that December meeting, how many of those have we enacted on?
Well, what we did was we tiered off that into this list of 11 things that the council talked about a year ago in these workshops, and we're implementing those. I think we've had some point out we haven't done very much on a couple of them, but I'd say we have a pretty good batting average on that list that came from that. So I guess I would respectfully disagree that we have studies that aren't producing any results. Certainly, as staff, we don't want to spend public dollars on things that aren't going to be useful. You know, to me, some planning can be very useful, even if it takes several years. So, for example, the West Melbourne Community Park Master Plan, we followed it, right? If we end up with a existing parks master plan of upgrades, we can follow that. May not be able to do that in a year, but why would we adopt a plan and then not implement that as budgets allow? So I think the idea of some of these plans is to use it as a budget tool, because you can't accomplish everything in 1 year. I think you started out saying exactly right. We can accomplish anything. We just can't accomplish everything, in particular, I guess I would add, in 1 year. If we have a little bit longer view, I think we have the financial wherewithal to do pretty much everything that you talked about this evening, and that would be a great benefit to the citizens and businesses and visitors to our community.
All right. All right, Mr. McDowell.
In that same line of thinking, I mean, you're talking about something that is grander. I mean, whether it's a sculpture park, I mean, we can be bold and think in that route, but I think that's something that we have to really plan for quite a ways out, I would think. You know, that's not something that, you know, but if that's, I mean, we don't have an art center. There's a lot of things, but if you look at what we are as a city, we're well thought of. We are, you know, so it isn't, you know, what's our signature? There's no signature in some of the other outlining cities here. I mean, I can't think of anything that says, wow, they've got that we don't have.
Well, I guess I'd like to say something that I think the mayor's led us on as being a community that cares about people who have special needs and been very welcoming and opening, and it's the Supportive Promise, it's the West Melbourne Community Park Field of Dreams, it's the Promise Treasures Thrift Shop. I mean, each of you are very supportive of that, and not every community is welcoming. So if we sort of had a identity to be proud of, I would say it's probably that we really support our special needs community like nobody else. And that's a great signature.
Very proud of that, yeah. All right, we'll end the budget workshop, take a 5-minute break, and start our regular city council meeting. Stretch your leg.